You are tuned to another episode of In Town Today. I'm David Charles, and I'm with my co-producer, Helen King.
Hello.
We extend a warm welcome to you specifically, and to all our other listeners, whether you're travelling, working, or maybe just relaxing. In Town Today is where we talk to townspeople about their business, their occupation, their event, or their motivating passion in life, or at least one of them. In this episode, we're meeting a long-standing and prominent business person running one of the town's clothing outlets. And that town is Tetbury. As is usual with the people we meet, their first point of interest, today a business they run, is not the only fascinating thing we will learn about them, as we will discover very shortly. The business we are talking about in this podcast is a men's tailor, the Tetbury Tailor, here in the centre of town. And now it's our great pleasure to welcome our special guest and business owner, Keith Lever.
Right, yes, hello.
Hello. Welcome to this podcast, Keith.
Right.
Well, here we are. We're in the centre of Tetbury, and a most fascinating gents outfitters, if I can call it that.
Thank you.
Tailoring.
Thank you.
Wonderful clothes here for the discerning gent,
Thank you.
can I say? And you must have fitted out some very interesting people in the time that you've been in this town, Keith. And how long have you been in this town?
Right, thank you, David. Well, I've been here now 12 years, and we started in 2009, November 2009. I'd left a company called Winsome Tailoring, based in Norwich. That was the research development body of Geese and Hawks, and manufacturing side of Geese and Hawks. I went down with type 1 diabetes not long after we moved here in Tetbury. And my job within Winsome Tailoring was going around the branches of Geese and some upmarket shops all over the country, advising them how to do made-to-measure suits, and also managing the Bleeden brand, which is a country wear brand. So that was my project, and we moved here. Within 6 months, we had registered my Tilly, dog Tilly, into the vet. I hadn't registered at the doctors, and I suddenly went down with type 1 diabetes.
Yo.
So the doctor said to me, "What do you do? What's your occupation?" I explained what I do. And also the mileage I would do a year, which is about 32,000 miles, bordering on 35,000 miles a year. And the doctor said, "You've got to look for something else."
Right.
And so this business came available here. My roots are actually in menswear. I used to work for Van Hoosen as well years ago.
Right.
So this is really my background, is in men's clothing and in shirts. So that's how we started. Now the thing is, if you cast your memory back to 2009, you couldn't get a business loan. So
That was shortly after the crash.
correct, yeah. So the banks all crashed. I couldn't get a business loan. You would need to produce 18 months of trading pattern. So how do you start a business with no money? Difficult, David. So what I did, I got in touch with all the people I knew within the trade and asked them if they would support me during a period of start-up, and they did for 60 days. So I started the business on the 1st of November, and by January 2010, seems a long time ago now, we paid all the bills.
Right.
And it was a bit of a white knuckle ride, to say the very least, because I thought, how on earth are we going to survive this? Because we'd just gone through a bit of a recession at that point,
Right.
and banks had crashed. But everyone was a bit nervous, but we're still here.
Not least of all, of course, the consumer. I mean, they were holding back on
They
spending
were
money
holding-
with
They
you.
were
I guess.
holding back. Everyone was very, very twitchy about the economy going forward, but we are still here.
Yeah.
And lots of companies now have gone by the wayside, as we all know. You've got people such as Austin Reed's gone,
Yeah.
been established a long, long time, over 130 odd years. So I'm still here.
You're still here.
Yeah.
Now, You said that you've been crisscrossing the country, doing
Yes.
30-odd thousand miles a year,
Yeah.
calling in on the geese
Yes.
outlets, I guess.
Yeah.
But something brought you to Tetbury. What was it that brought you to Tetbury?
Right, okay. Previously to Tetbury, we were living in Cobham in Surrey,
Right.
and on the M25,
Yeah.
no problem with that. I could commute anywhere there. But the drawback is the M25, as we know, on a Friday night is just like a car park.
Yeah.
So my wife and I, we decided to move. More so my wife rather than
Right.
me, because I really like the Brooklands connection at Brooklands in Surrey.
Yeah.
That's why I like that. But anyway, we moved here because my wife, now my ex-wife, she had a company transfer to Gloucestershire.
Uh-huh.
So that's how we got over here. We were constantly looking around for somewhere to live, and Tetbury seemed to be the ideal place, because her place of work at that time was at Kemble on the old RAF base.
Was it?
So that's where it all sort of established. There.
Okay, so this was going to be an obvious
Yeah,
commuting
spot. Yeah,
for
obvious
your
spot.
wife.
So that's right. So basically, I started here, and at that time I was still working for Wensum Geese and Hawks.
Right.
So I was still travelling,
Right.
and I was being constantly asked, because I used to dress the part, where do you get your clothes? And I said, well, I actually work for this company, and of course everybody knew who they were. So I thought this could be a nice little opening here, and this shop came available, and I thought this could really work here, because everyone, as far as I can see, was wearing these tweed jackets and these coloured jeans. Shoes made by Joseph Cheney, and I thought this is the right sort of area to be selling this sort of stuff. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So that was a decision that you made in 2009
Correct.
to give this a go.
Yeah,
And as you quite rightly said, you're still here.
yeah,
So it must have worked and still is.
yeah. Well, it was pretty. I must admit, it was pretty scary at the beginning, because obviously I was when I was putting the orders down for clothing, because it soon mounts up. You know,
Yeah.
you don't.
Yeah.
You can just look around and think, oh my goodness me, you're into £5,000 expenditure straight away, and then another £7,000 there, then the shop fit. So these things were mounting up, but lucky enough the companies I was with gave me some 60-day credit,
Right.
and that really got me off the ground. Really.
You were off and running.
Off and running.
Thank
yeah.
goodness for that.
It was a bit of struggle,
Okay.
but we're here.
Well, we'll come back to
Yeah.
the life and soul of the business in a
Yeah,
moment.
sure.
But we know, Helen and I know, that since you've been in Tetbury for since 2000 and
It's 2007.
2007, right?
Yeah.
You've been involved in other things in the town, of course.
Yes, I have,
And we met some weeks ago at an event in town, Wacky Races, Tetbury's Wacky Races,
That's right,
which is quite a spectacle. And anyone that hasn't seen that really needs to take a look.
I was just admiring your ship, actually.
All right, thank you.
HMS Warspite, it's called, isn't it? No, it's a Queen Elizabeth.
Queen Elizabeth, it's the same class.
Yeah, Queen Elizabeth class battleship.
Do you want to have a closer look?
No, you're all right.
Is that okay?
It's fabulous, isn't it?
We'll start from.
Wacky Races.
Yeah,
Wacky
Wacky
Races,
Races.
Wacky
We're talking
Races.
about Wacky Races.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, hang on, let me pick up my thread. Keith, as a result of the conversation we had
Yeah,
at that
sure,
time,
sure.
it was fascinating to learn that it was actually your idea
Yeah.
to do Wacky Races, and
Yeah.
that was some years ago now, and
Mm.
it's blossomed into the magnificent
Yes.
event that it is, where people come from, not just Tetbury, of course, but from all over Gloucestershire and beyond
That's right.
beyond the borders. But tell us about how that got going and why that idea came to you in the first place.
Right, okay then. Well, what happened was, that's 10 years ago now, of course. 2011, I was seconded onto the Jubilee Committee. I was already in the Warsack Committee, And
The Woolsack Committee, that just explain
yeah, sure.
to our listeners.
Yeah,
The Woolsack Committee is actually another event, isn't it?
that's another event which takes part at the end of May every year, and the idea is that you have these teams going up and down the Gumstore Hill, which is a 1 in 4 hill, with carrying a £60, I think, pack on your back made of wool.
Just for
real
fun,
wool.
isn't it?
It's a fun event.
Yes.
Not punishment.
Why would you do this?
Not punishment in any well, it could be punishment.
That's
but
fun.
That is fun.
It's fun to watch.
Yeah. But anyway, this was the event that we had, and it's world renowned. It's a bit like the cheese rolling
Yes.
that they have in
Yes,
Gloucester as
another
well.
excellent.
Another thing we have, a bit wacky,
Bit quirky.
bit quirky. So that's what we did. Anyway, so I was seconded onto the Jubilee Committee in 2011. I was sitting next door to Stephen Hurst, who is a local councillor, and I think at that point he was the mayor. I'm not quite sure. Anyway, we got chatting about one or two things, and we had this extra day, if you remember, which was the Tuesday in June, wasn't it, I think?
Yeah.
Anyway, so Stephen said to me, what are we going to do for this extra day? What event can we do? And I'd already seen something similar to Wacky Races, which was a soapbox derby in the Goodwood Revival, something similar to it. And I thought that could work here because we've got a hill. That would work. But a lot of people thought, when I got the ball rolling, a lot of people thought it's going to be Gumstore Hill, which is a 1 in 4. And that's out of the question altogether, out of the question. It's too steep. Anyway, so I said, well, how about we can do the hill in Chipping Street, going down to Sizes Road, going down to Royal Oak. The original idea was actually to go down into the Goodshed.
Yep.
That was the original idea, but we couldn't really take away access to the car park. So then we came up with the idea of going on a hairpin bend, which is lots of thrills and spills there, as we've seen, going round the corner, open the 5-bar gate up, and going down to the Millennium Green.
Yep.
Anyway, that was the idea. We had to put the proposal forward to the Lions. So at the time, I was in the Lions Club of Tetbury.
So this started out as a council initiative?
Not necessarily. This really was a Lions.
Okay.
Because all these things are done independently within Tetbury. And at the time, I was in the Lions Club. And actually, I just joined. And I put this proposal about this Wacky Races, and they thought I was completely mad. They just couldn't get to grips with it. And I said, well, this is how it's going to work. And I tried to explain it to people who've never ever seen this at all. Apart from about 3, I had 3 enthusiasts, you could say, within the club. The rest of the club were
A bit pessimistic.
they were dead against it, if the truth be known.
Right.
That's
worse than pessimistic, isn't it?
Correct.
Yeah.
They were putting obstacles in the way at every part of this. I can go into further detail if you like, but
No.
I was putting these proposals forward, and it was a nightmare to get the thing off the ground. Straw bales.
Right.
We're surrounded with farms,
Yep.
and apparently they said we can't get straw bales, but because of my connections with Highgrove, we got them quite easily.
Right.
So the David Wilson, who was the estate manager there, delivered the bales of straw, delivered them, picked them up, and that was no problem. Done deal.
Yep.
And then the first year, if you put your memory cap on, it wasn't a very good start to the day. It was start to the year. It was raining quite a bit. In actual fact, I think it was raining up until the Jubilee. And on the day of the Wacky Races, it was a good morning. It was a nice morning. And then all of a sudden, in the afternoon, when we were just about to start the Wacky Races,
Buckets.
yeah,
Oh
buckets.
gosh.
But we did have the practice run. The idea, we had some practice runs in the morning, which get a flavour of how it's going to work.
Right.
It was a learning curve for us, being the Lions Club, how to get this organised. And we got it organised, and we did a bit of more fine tuning. We got it just absolutely right. And I think I'm right in saying the first year we had 6 carts, and they went down a couple of times. It was a bit of a thrill and spill, and it was good. But they were very amateurish, if I could say that. Apart from about 2, which were a bit more
substantial.
Yeah, a bit more commercial.
Well, what a feather in your cap, Keith. I
Thank
mean,
you.
gracious. It's we've been to a number of these now. In fact, we've done a video about the last one,
Yes,
and there are other
Yes,
videos on the net that people
Mm.
can view. And it's really quite a stonking event, and
Yes.
not only a feather in your cap,
Thank
Keith,
you.
but also in the cap for Tetbury, I'd say.
Absolutely. Right.
And we talked a moment ago about, or you mentioned the cheese rolling,
Yes,
which
of
is
course.
another Gloucestershire
Yes,
event.
of
I mean, people must think we're nutters in Gloucestershire.
It does help.
It does help, yeah. But it's interesting that whatever you do, whatever kind of organisation you're in, there's always a balance of opinion about things, and you get the pessimistic types,
Yes.
and you get those that are anti. But
Yeah.
but that's par for the course, isn't it? Some things are just meant to succeed. Wacky Races succeeded, and thank
Yes.
goodness it has.
Yes.
And so is your business here in Tetbury. Now, you must have had some very interesting people come in and see you over these years, Keith. What can you tell us about some of those characters that you've dressed?
Well, yes, there's high-ranking people there, of course. I don't want to mention.
Not specifically.
Not
perhaps,
specifically,
yeah.
no. But we've had some nice characters and very, very nice customers, and on a return basis, which is really quite a thing to keep going, actually. So we keep some of these guys coming in, and they know me by name. They know my little dog by name, and
Tilly.
sometimes Tilly,
Yeah.
and they come in and give treats to Tilly, which is absolutely brilliant. But she's an old lady now. She's almost 16, so she's an old
Yeah.
lady. But what is so nice about it, we're seeing regulars coming back, and they like what I sell, and they like the product.
Yeah.
It's good.
And the product is only accessible by coming into the store, isn't it?
That's correct. I've been toying with the idea of online, but when you see the return basis of clothing in particular, a small business like I've got here, you just cannot do that.
Yes.
The return basis, you're talking about over 60% on clothing.
60%.
60%.
Good heavens.
Yeah.
So you can't really do that.
No, that would be very demanding in your time.
That's right. So the thing is, there's a situation whereby it was actually on the news this morning that apparently some of these big companies like Next are going to charge for returns, and some of these other sports equipment companies are going to charge for returns. And if you take it back to the shop, you don't get a return
No.
charge.
Yeah.
And some of them are actually about $3.95. So
Right.
it does actually add up
Yes.
per item.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't really do it. And also the thing is, in all fairness, really, the idea of coming to a shop, this is quite a specialist type shop here. So you want the customer relation aspect of
Yes.
the whole thing.
Yes.
It isn't sort of a department store type image. This is a specialist type shop.
It's personal, isn't it?
It's personal
very
shopping.
personal.
It's personal
yeah.
shopping, and we do made-to-measure suits, and we do jackets, as you can see behind you, and we do lots of specialist things.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I do try.
Yeah. Now, when I asked you a moment ago, you must have had some special characters in here. I was half thinking about something you said to us before, that you'd done some measuring of some MPs at the Palace of Westminster,
yes.
which of course predates your business here in Tetbury.
It does, yeah.
But an interesting window, I thought you explained on some of the characters and some of the big characters
Yes.
in Westminster.
Well, that's right. On my previous company, Winsome Tailoring, which was was geese and hawks, there was a connection of one of the researchers for an MP, and there was a connection, I think, probably over dinner, as these things are, or over glass support, as you would
something
imagine,
like that.
something like that. And they got chatting away, and I was charged of going into Palace of Westminster and measuring up some MPs, and that was quite. And you saw these MPs in a different type of character to what you normally see them on.
Well, I guess they were undressed, were they at the time?
Well, no, they weren't. No, they weren't. No.
But they were going to be.
No. But it's quite interesting when you're chatting as a one-to-one basis to these guys, and it's completely off what they normally would do, or the difference of environment. They really are very interesting people, and it's quite interesting actually. The people we had, and there's one guy who I'm not going to mention, it was very, very close to the edge of the tape measure. And it was actually borderline case, and we had to cut the suit by hand rather than go on the laser,
right.
on the laser treatment of the cloth. Yeah.
How about that?
It was interesting, and there were some nice guys. We got chatting to them, and I think I did about 10 of them, and then called back again to see them again. Nick Hurd, that's the son of Douglas Hurd.
Right.
Henry Billingham was another.
Yes.
Yeah, he was another chap. He was talking about his injuries he got at playing polo, I think. He dislocated and broke his shoulder, so that was a bit of a challenge to get him looking pretty decent in a suit. And Robert Keyes is another one we had to deal with, and lots of guys.
So some notable names.
Some notable names.
You've run the measure over.
We did, yeah. And the thing, it was challenging because they all came in at once. Then all of a sudden they introduced me to the MPs, and then they came back one at a time, which was quite nice. And we had a sort of a one-to-one basis of about half an hour on each customer, which is quite good actually. Nice and easy.
Well, we'd like to introduce some customers to you, Keith. We're sat here in this splendid gents' tailors, and we're looking at a multitude of different coloured socks hanging from the windows. Wonderful jackets here,
and don't forget the Tetbury tweed.
I was just going to mention it.
Sorry,
Thank you for that. Yeah, and the very special Tetbury tweed, which I ask to confess I hadn't heard of before. We spoke about this, but yeah, wonderful Tetbury tweed, which is marvellous. Now, what we will do in the show notes is to have a link to your website, so people can take a look for themselves to see where we are and the sort of things that you're selling. But what I think perhaps the people visiting your website won't see directly is this eclectic collection you have of modelling. We have behind me HMS Queen Elizabeth,
correct,
which is almost a 3-foot size model of a British battleship.
Correct.
In the window, we have a truly magnificent model railway.
That's right.
In fine detail, with working engines and coaches with working lights
and sound.
And thank you, sound. For those that might pick up the hissing in the background, that's a steam locomotive.
We
just
have a steam
letting
locomotive
off, isn't it?
in the background.
Yeah. And then there's other models of cars and aeroplanes.
That's right, you noticed,
Yeah.
Well done, thank you.
So it's more than just a gents' tailors.
Yes.
It's Keith's gents' tailors.
I wanted to make it look a bit more. It's like a chaps. It's like a chaps.
Yes. Emporium,
or his man shed.
Yes.
You could say.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's great.
That's what I really wanted to achieve. The ship over there, which you mentioned earlier, I built that. Inevitably from matchsticks.
Did you really?
That's matchsticks.
Correct.
Wow.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
Thank you. There's two. I
surprised.
can give you two stories actually on the subject of the ship. Before I had the notice in front there, which says HMS Queen Elizabeth, which was actually one of the cap tallies that the ratings would have on their cap. Before I had that, this gentleman came in. I didn't know who he was at all, not at all. He came in and he said to me, that is the Queen Elizabeth in 1941, wearing its intermediate disruptive type camouflage. Now I know that because I built the ship.
Yeah.
I thought, my goodness me, this guy knows his stuff.
knows his ships.
Because that ship has been previously, I can tell you, it's been the Hood, it's been the Bismarck, it's been the Graf Spee, it's been the Belfast, because people don't know what the ship is. They thought it was another ship.
Right.
So this guy came in, he said to me, is it insured? At the time I said, no, it isn't insured. I buy and sell these, and I've seen them go for about a foot long, £15,000, as that same quality as that ship in the window. Because I got the plans from the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich, so I'm actually using Admiralty plans for that ship.
Perfect.
He said to me, I will give you a valuation, and it will be on your computer today. So there he was with his cell phone, and it went onto my phone, onto my computer, and he said between £25,000 and £30,000 if that went to auction. Yeah. It all depends upon who the auction or the gathering is.
Yes.
And it is so accurate. Yeah.
Wow. Well, it's a masterpiece,
It's
isn't it?
It certainly is.
And I do have another one as well, which is next door. But yeah.
Okay.
How long did it take you to make it?
Thank you, Helen. That took me 5 years. Not obviously not on and it was on and off, more so off than on.
Yes.
And you had to do a lot of research in, as I say, going back to camouflage, getting the camouflage right, getting all the aspects of it correct. The gentleman that came in a little while ago, who said he thought it was the Warspite. I got the plans for the hull of the Warspite, but it's slightly different. So I had to make some adjustments on the way through to get that correct.
Okay.
But it was a challenge. But anyway, I like these challenges, and yeah, it was good fun really doing that.
But why a naval vessel? I have to ask you, Keith.
Right, okay, David. Well, the thing is, my very, very first employment was in a big department store in Cambridge. It's Tilly. Hello, darling. So here's Tilly. So what we got here is that in this big department store, established 1750. You can imagine what it was like. A bit like Grace Brothers, actually.
Yeah, right.
And I was talking to one of the guys there, and they all were these ex-servicemen. And he said to me, he was in Alexandria Harbour, and he took a photograph of the Queen Elizabeth. I thought, I'd never heard of this ship. So he showed me the photograph, and I thought that looked rather impressive. And previously to that, I'd already built the Victory anyway, some time ago. So I was quite not bad at doing models at the time.
Right.
So I thought, I wouldn't mind having a go at that. So I got the plans and did all the research, and that's how I got into that. So what happened is that this guy, Mr. Spicer, he showed me a photograph of this exact ship in Alexandria Harbour, and I just thought that was so impressive. And then I read all about the history of the ship and how it was, how it was put together. And the same class were at the Battle of Jutland in 1916 in the 5th Battle Squadron. And I read all about it. I thought, God, this is interesting. And that ship, the Queen Elizabeth, was Vice Admiral Cunningham's flagship during the evacuation of Crete in 1941. So there's lots of history.
Wow.
And I thought that was rather impressive.
Indeed, it is.
It's
Incredibly impressive.
Indeed.
And just to be clear, I mean, we're talking about 1941 here.
Yes, of course.
The modern day HMS Queen Elizabeth, which will be triggered in people's minds, of
Yes.
course, is a different vessel completely.
Correct.
Far younger, of course, and
Yes.
is the double turret aircraft carrier,
Sure.
which launched a few years ago. But
I've got an interesting story about that, actually.
what the modern Queen Elizabeth?
Correct.
Okay.
Right, okay, this chap came in, and he said to me, he was rather puzzled. It's the Queen Elizabeth. And he just said, that's the name of the new aircraft carrier, the Queen Elizabeth. Yes, that's right. But that's named after our present Queen. Yeah. So what's this one named after? Queen Elizabeth I. Yes, it might. Tilbury Docks. Didn't Queen Elizabeth I say, I may have a... maybe a weak and feeble woman, but I've got the heart and soul and strength of a man.
That sounds right.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And that was Tilbury.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First Queen Elizabeth.
The first Queen Elizabeth, the Spanish Armada and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. People won't remember that, will they, directly?
Are you going to interview Tilly now?
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say,
Definitely.
Keith, this has been a fascinating this little discussion
Thank
with
you.
you about
I
you
enjoyed it. I
and
enjoyed
about
it.
your business. And I was going to say that people coming to visit Tetbury and hopefully to visit the Tetbury Tailor,
Thank you.
they'll spot you on the street walking young Tilly, well, she's just 16 now, working young Tilly. She's generally about 10 feet behind you, I think, normally, isn't she?
She normally is, that's
Yeah.
right. She just trots along,
Yeah.
but she has difficulty answering the phone
Right?
and also using the keyboards on the computer.
It's training. It's a training
Otherwise,
thing.
she's okay. She's okay with most
She's
things.
absolutely delicious, and for people that can't see Tilly, I mean, she's no higher than 12 inches, is she?
That's right.
And not a lot longer, to be honest, or
No.
shorter. should I say. Absolutely lovely, Tilly. And Tilly, you must be a terrier of some sort.
She is a long-haired Jack Russell Terrier.
How about
Is
that?
she?
That's
A
right.
long-haired Jack Russell Terrier.
And she's met Camilla,
Right.
Well,
very much so. In actual fact, when we moved here in Tetbury, obviously didn't have the shop then, but this one was only about a year old. And Camilla switched the lights on for Christmas lights.
Yeah.
And I was just standing by the Blue Zucchini, which is the restaurant
Yes.
in Tetbury, and Camilla came down the steps and came straight over to me and asked Tilly's name.
Right.
Got chatting about Tilly, and anyway, we met them again subsequently, and I just said, "Good evening, Mum. We've actually met before." And she remembers Tilly. So,
oh, fantastic.
not necessarily me, but
No,
she
remembers Tilly.
she
Well,
remembers
who
Tilly.
wouldn't?
I know.
Honestly.
So there we are.
Well, Keith, this has been delightful.
Yes,
thank you
thank you
very
so
much
much.
indeed.
Thank you, David. Thank you. And
Most
thank
interesting
you.
indeed.
Yes, thank you,
Yeah.
Keith. It's been really, really interesting.
That's it.
You have been listening to our podcast In Town Today with Keith Lever, proprietor of the Tetbury Tailor, based here in Tetbury. Check out the podcast show notes for details about the Tetbury Tailor, the website, and importantly, where to find Keith and his shop here in the town. Do also look out for our further podcasts on our In Conversation page of the Connect website. It is where we will be meeting more guests to talk about their businesses, their fascinating lives, or both. Until we meet back with you next time.
It's goodbye from me, Helen King.
And from me, David Charles.